Hello. Today, I'm going to do a little discussion on the brass stacker. Now, you could do a Google search on this thing and probably come up with a million different reviews and different configurations that people use this thing for. It's specifically made for Mosin Nagants. I think all of them except the M44. I think they have one for the M44. I didn't buy that one. I got just the regular one for the 9130. The 9130 sight, if you take a look at yours, it has two pins in it that actually hold the sight base on. You don't actually remove the sight when you install this thing. You're just taking the pins out, putting the brass stacker mount, which of course doesn't come with the scope. It's just this mount here, the rail here, and the mount. And when you knock out those two pins, you just put in these two screws instead with the bolts on them, and you just bolt this mount directly to the rear sight. Now, I saw a couple of different options for putting sight bases on these things. One of them was a little more intrusive. I think it had something to do with drilling something. I'm not 100% sure. But this one seemed to be the one that everybody liked. Plus, Nut and Fancy did a nice review on it that gave you like a nice up and down on the thing. And I thought that this was the way to go for me. The reason why I wanted to scope one of these is that I would be interested in getting one of the original Mosin snipers, but it seems that they're actually pretty difficult to come by, like an actual original one. That even the ones that they sell online, that they market to you as, Russian snipers just in, are Arsenal refurbs that, they say, well, these would be the correct gear that they would use, and these would be the correct scopes that they would use. It's like, yeah, but is it a correct, I'm going to spend, $800 on one of these things, plus shipping, plus transfer fee, only if, you're up near a grand here, with tax and everything. And I'm only going to pay $1,000 if it's an actual, World War II Russian sniper rifle. Some of these guys, they say, oh yeah, they're actual Russian, scopes. They could have been on an SVT, they could have been on a Mosin, who knows? But they're original Russian scopes. I mean, so what? You know what I mean? I want that kind of money. I want that actual original rifle. I don't want one that's just kind of like put together. I could put one together, you know what I mean? And if I'm going to put one together, I'm not going to use like that cheesy scope, and I'm not going to use like that cheesy mount, you know what I mean? It's like, if you're going to do it, I want it to be accurate. I want it to be right, you know what I mean? And I wanted to have the type of, the scope power. I wanted to have what I wanted to have, you know what I mean? So for me, this is a good option. And also because you can choose the rifle this way. So I took a nice hex receivered 35, which, look at this thing. I mean, this thing is beauty. I mean, when the story behind even finding this is odd. I had a guy in a gun shop. I know these guys in the gun shops around where I live, and they'll call me up and be like, hey, we got this in, we got that in. They give me heads ups, you know what I mean? So he gave me a heads up that he got in some Mosins. He goes, weren't you interested in a hex receivered one? We got like 6 of them in. And I'm like, how you got a delivery of Mosins and they just happen to be hex receivers? It just seemed a little odd, and I went down there and I wanted a Tula one, and these things were all garbage, you know what I mean? They all looked horrible. And as I went through them, I was like, wow, there's one there that just looked mint. I was like, look at the wood on that one, and I pull it off the shelf, and I'm looking at it, I'm like, this one is mint. And sure enough, it was a Tula. It was just like meant to be, for me. But this is one of the cleanest Mosins that I've ever seen, you know what I mean? And I got lucky, with it being a 35. And boy, when I took this thing to the range, it shot beautifully, you know what I mean? I think I did a video on it. I'm not 100% sure. But let's talk about this brass stacker now. I've heard that these pins can sometimes be soldered in and that they're a little bit more difficult to get out. I originally took my round receiver 9130. I hammered the pins out of that one and I put it on there. and I liked the way it looked and everything like that. And then I decided to put it on this one. The more I shot it that way, and it shot pretty good. But I'm like, why not use, if you're going for accuracy with a scope on a Mosin? I assumed that this one is more accurate. I think that this rifle is actually more accurate, that it shoots more true. So I swapped it over to here. And on neither of them did I have soldered pins. I got lucky, and they didn't bend or anything. I hammered them back into the 9130, and that one still shoots true, you know what I mean? And what's cool about the fact that you're leaving the sight on is that, I'm not sure if you'll actually be able to see this, but you could actually still use, I'd have to get closer, and I'm not going to be able to do that, but you could actually still use the sights. You could still see underneath. You still have a sight picture underneath to look straight through and actually still use the iron sights. So it's kind of cool that they still stay on there. Not only is this thing just removable and you put the pins right back in and, it's like it was never on there. That's one cool thing. But the other cool thing is that even with it on, you could still utilize the rifle and with the iron sights if you if you should choose. So that's pretty cool. And well, I decided to put the same scope that Nut and Fancy used, actually. I believe in, somebody else might use trial and error, or why should you waste your time with that trial and error? Just pay attention to what, if I tell you that I tried 9 different ways of doing something and this way worked out best for this situation, and your situation is the same as that, like, why make the same 9 mistakes, you know what I mean? If you can trust someone, you know what I mean? I would think that I'm someone you could trust. And, Nothing Fancy's been in the game for a long time. I trust him, you know what I mean? Anything I hear from Nothing Fancy, Gun Geek, these guys, they're out at the range and they're actively doing these things, like me, you know what I mean? They put their time in, so, they're not just, this couch is where I do my videos, but all of this trial and error, goes on at the range, which I want to try to get some range videos out there, actually. But this is the scope. It is a Weaver Classic. Let me see if I can steady that. There's the model number. I got it in black matte because, like the receiver is kind of like a matte. It's not like a glossy receiver. And it did match. It did match pretty nice. You know what I mean? It does match nicely. And I also got these flip up, scope covers, just so that you don't have to go wiping them, you know what I mean, when they get dusty or they get dirty. These things are nice. They're not see-through. They're just plastic, just solid plastic covers that you'd have to flip up when you shoot. But I never really like the see-through ones, because then those get dirty and you're wiping that anyway. So like, what, it's almost like, what's the point? You know what I mean? You're going to just wipe those and scratch them up, and then your view is going to be crappy. So why not just have a black one you can't see through that you just flip up when you want to shoot, and then your view is always clean. Now, the deal with this thing, here's what I found. I put it on. Now, this is what you'd think. You'd say, okay, it's just screwing into like these whacked out holes that the Russians are punching through to put their sight on. I mean, the Russians would put their sight on and then maybe sight the rifle in, or maybe have to adjust this or that, or tap the front sight side to side or whatever to get it. And how accurate would it be, really? I mean, it's an iron sight. It's not like you're going at like 100 yards. It's going to be like this much difference if you're moving it. The Russians would just tack these things on and be like, there you go to the range with your rifle and figure out where it shoots, and good luck out there, soldier. That was basically how it was, I'm sure. So you got to worry. You're like, well, if I'm putting a precision scope and I'm just using a very unprecision way of installing it. I can only imagine now that I'm going to go to the range, and I'm sure you've been there, that you're shooting and you're not even on the paper, and you're cranking, and then you get it on the paper, and then you're turning, and you're getting it closer, and then you're noticing you're turning and it's not getting any closer. Like, you reach the limit of the scope, and I've been there sighting in scopes, and that can be like a pain in the ass. What amazed the hell out of me is that I put this thing on, I sat down in front of a target at 50 yards, and I was only about maybe 5 inches high, 5 inches right, something like that, And I just I gave a couple of clicks to go down, shot a few rounds. Now I was perfectly, the height was perfect, and I was just off 5 inches to the right. 5 clicks, 5 or 6 clicks, bringing it in, and I was right on the bullseye, and then even fine-tuning it to get really close, you know what I mean? Now this thing is what is it, 8 power? Yeah, the biggest the zoom was 8 power, and at 8 power, you could actually see at 50 yards. You could actually see where you're impacting. So I mean, how cool is that? That with a Mosin, it isn't that typical shoot 5 or 10 rounds, then maybe get a glass and look, or wait till the range officer signals the ceasefire to walk down and see where you're at. And you get like actual real-time shot-by-shot enjoyment with this thing, because you're visualizing where each one is going, not even with one of those targets where the shots glow, just a regular paper target, and you're seeing them, with 8 power at 50 yards. At 100 yards, it'd be a little iffy with 8 power, but of course, you're going to see better than you would with, than you would iron sights. You certainly wouldn't see anything at 100 yards of what you're doing down there, you know what I mean? So, I was amazed how close it was to being true right out of the gate. And then this is an awesome scope because just those slight adjustments had it right there, you know what I mean? And now I spent a day, I went through 150 rounds, and it did not move. I'm thinking I'm going to have it wandering too, And now I checked these, the 2 bolts. There's 2 bolts that put this thing on right there that you could see right there. Those are the 2 bolts. And I've heard reviews where people said these bolts were sharp, but apparently I see now they put bolts with like rounded, one side of it is rounded, so you use that for the outside. I see that they actually listen to customer complaints or just YouTube videos of people saying certain things. I think Nothing Fancy might have said you might have to grind those down a little bit to make them smooth. So apparently they started using bolts that are smooth. So that's nice. And I might have had to snug them just once. You know what I mean? They might have loosened up just a touch, and I snugged them. Of course, Loctite, you snug them down with a little Loctite on the threads, and then you're probably not going to have an issue. Me, I just wanted to see what would happen if I just... it seemed like after going through some rounds and giving it another snug, then it stayed right where it was. Never had to touch it after that. And let me tell you, I have a hard case that I keep this one in, right? I've lugged it. I lugged it home, lugged it back to the range once, wound up not using it, lugged it back home again, then took it to the range once again, and it was straight on true. It's not like traveling or cooling down or getting banged around a bit changed anything. It is a quality sight. I mean, I got some nice scope rings here for it too, but nothing that's not like $100 scope rings. They're really not. I mean, I don't remember what I paid for them, but they were like moderately priced ones, you know what I mean? Not those nutty ones. I don't know what they are. It doesn't even say anything on them, so I'm not even 100% sure. I mean, that's what they look like. If somebody knows just by looking at that exactly what those are, more power to you. Of course, it's very important in this area where you put these ones that are 2-piece like that these caps, when they go down, you have to be very careful about the tightening sequence. It's almost like you torque it like you're putting a cylinder head on a car. You would want to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, crisscrossing them as you go, and just make sure that you're not bottoming one side while the other side has a huge gap. So you want to see it kind of end up looking like that, where you have that type of gap on one side, and there you go, that type of gap on the other side. See, it's all similar gaps that are in here, in this area here, and yeah, traveling back and forth didn't do anything as far as screwing up where it was sighted in. And I'm sure to this day, now if I took it to the range now, I'm pretty sure I'm going to sit down and I'm going to be putting it right in that center ring without a problem. You know what I mean? It definitely holds true. Now, if when you're punching out those pins, you see that there had been some butchering going on, or that some Russian was having a problem getting them in, and it seems sloppy. I mean, if you drive the bolt through and you feel play in the bolt, yeah, you might be having some kind of an issue. So you want to feel that out for sure. Me, when I knocked the pins out and I put the bolts through, the bolts fit. As a matter of fact, I might have even had to tap them in just to touch, like they might have gone in and might have needed a tap with the end of a screwdriver or something just to get them all the way through, which is probably what you want. You want them to fit snug like that. And use the washers that they give you. Use everything exactly the way they give you. Read the instructions properly on exactly how to put them in, and then there you go. And then of course this is this is a pistol scope. You know what I mean? Because when you shoulder this thing, you see how long that eye relief is. That's not a typical scope where it's right on your eye. This is like a scout scope, which is interesting because you fire this with basically both eyes open, which is I was like, why would they call it a scout scope? Like I didn't understand really where that came from for years, And now I understand the idea behind it is that with both eyes open, you're seeing everything that's going on. So if there's someone that comes into your view, on the other end of a ridge line, if you're shooting or whatever, you'd see it. You have both eyes open. You have a view of everything, and just with your peripherals are there, but you're still able to see a clear view right through the scope with the long eye relief. You're able to get a very clear view of seeing the reticle and exactly what you're targeting, but still have your peripherals. It's very interesting, and it made this Mosin incredibly fun at the range, being able to actually see where each shot is going, and to have that kind of accuracy. Then you could really see. I mean, you have those people saying that these things are junky. It's like, yeah, they're made in a way that's quick and easy to make. People say like the bolts are sticky and this and that. There's all these cures. People talk a lot of shit about these, but then do they really get in there and clean them right? Do they really clean those locking lug recesses out properly? Do they really get all the cosmoline out of it? Do they, are they really preparing these properly? Like the way a Russian would when he goes into war. You know what I mean? They obviously weren't full of cosmoline at that point. And all those years of storage, things need to be addressed on these. They're re-arsenaled, and who knows if the parts fit 100% right. You might have to do a little work on these. I mean, don't go crazy if you're not qualified to be messing with things. Obviously, this could be headspace issues and things like that by changing bolts or changing parts or grinding things that aren't supposed to be grinded. So definitely be careful and do your research, or leave it to a professional if it's necessary. But with my Mosins, from my experience, all you really need to do is just clean these things properly. Look at this bolt. I mean, this bolt it's smooth as butter, and it works just fine. It's not like I have issues with any of the Mosins that I have because I clean them. I mean, I'm like I said, with the re-arseling, I'm sure you could buy one that has an issue. You know what I mean? So address it, and you're not going to have problems in the future if you address them properly. But these things are accurate. These are as accurate as any other rifle. They're not junk. I mean, this is a long ass barrel, man. You know what I mean? And that adds to accuracy. And if if you have kind of like clunky iron sights, you're going to kind of have clunky sight picture, and it's going to give you like a clunky results on a target. You know what I mean? And if you have something that's a little bit more advanced, obviously they didn't have anything like this in in 1935 when this rifle was put together. But the Russian snipers for its day, that scope was it was probably a pretty decent scope. I don't think that it was a junky scope back then. They seem to even still last to this day. They seem okay. But using something like this, and you'll see in most of my videos, I don't really mess with anything modern. I don't really modernize or alter the guns at all. You know what I mean? But I do like shooting these Mosins, and this I thought was just a cool addition. This isn't something I would do to every rifle. I don't think I would do something like this to a K98K or to a Schmidt Rubin or a Swedish Mauser. I don't think I would mess with putting a sight on one of those. It's just something about having a couple of these and being like, well, let me utilize one, in this respect, and utilize this mount, and I give it a huge thumbs up. I really do. It performs the way it's supposed to. It's made quality. It might look like it's aluminum. You know what I mean? Usually things that are made that kind of look like this would be aluminum or something like that. It's steel. The whole mount, from the base to the dovetail to everything, is steel. You know what I mean? And good steel. This is solid stuff, and which is probably the reason why when the rifle heats up and heat starts to transfer into this mount from the barrel, you're not going to have any warpage or movement, or you're not going to notice when it's hot that it shoots to a certain area, and then when it cools off, it shoots here. It's steel, just like the rest of the rifle. You can have the same expansion and contracting properties, and I think steel for something like this is just probably a little bit better, only because, I mean, you know, you don't want to have aluminum on a Mosin. I mean, that's the way I look at it. You just want it to be steel. Like, this is steel, that's steel, this is steel, that's steel, steel. Everything's just steel. You know what I mean? Just have it all steel. And that's another nice thing about it, is that it's not aluminum or something like that. It's steel, and it feels very strong. And I'm sure it, you know, if it takes a rap here or there, I'd worry more about damage to the scope than I ever would from damage to this mount. You know what I mean? And again, here everything's tight, nothing's loosened up on it, and I really like it. I like the eye relief on it, and it's perfect too. This one, it seems that this scope, the reason why Nut and Fancy liked it as well is because when you mount it and it's in this position, I think his was a little bit more forward, I believe. I found maybe it's because I'm bigger, or, you know, whatever. It's just somehow my sight picture just ended up different. Where when you cheek weld right around this area, I think just me setting it up in the garage, when I cheek weld right here, you know, that's just perfect. I don't have to move around or look or get the sight picture. I cheek weld right here, and I have just a beautiful, perfect picture. And that's that. I highly recommend it. And if anybody wants to ask any specific questions about it, or you're having any issues with installation, you could shoot me a message. I hope I'd be able to help. And hope I see a couple of you out there at the range with your Mosins with the brass stacker on there. And if anyone has brass stackered an M44, let me know how that goes, because I'm pretty sure they have a different one for the M44, and I'm just curious if it's you know, works as well. All right, everyone, take care, enjoy shooting.